Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. Here are tonight's headlines. As societies open up, many are starting to see a resurgence of transmission, according to the World Health Organization, and they explain that much of this resurgence is occurring in clusters of cases related to gatherings of people. Tens of thousands of protesters gathered at the National Mall to commemorate the iconic 1963 March in Washington, marking the anniversary of Reverend Martin Luther King. Boseman, star of the groundbreaking superhero movie Black Panther, has died after a private 4-year battle with colon cancer.
You know, you can see in the...
As societies open up, many are starting to see a resurgence of transmission. The World Health Organization explained that much of this resurgence is occurring in clusters of cases related to gatherings of people. Take a look.
On COVID-19.
As societies open up, many are starting to see a resurgence of transmission. Much of this resurgence is occurring in clusters of cases related to gatherings of people, including at stadiums, nightclubs, places of worship, and crowds. These types of gatherings can be amplifying events that can be the spark that creates a much larger fire. Every country and community must make its own decisions about how to host these events safely, based on their own level of risk.
Normally when we talk about herd immunity, we talk about how much of the population needs to be vaccinated, to have immunity to the virus, to the pathogen, so that transmission can no longer take place, or it's very difficult for a virus or a pathogen to transmit between people. So that's the concept of that. One of the things, if we think about herd immunity in a natural sense of just letting a virus run, it's very dangerous because you would need a lot of people to be infected. And there are estimates of what percentage of the population needs to be infected. But that means that many people are infected, many people will need hospitalizations, and many people will die.
She also expressed concerns about public behavior, saying she's growing a little bit concerned that the use of masks is leading some people to think that they don't need to safe distance from others.
Use of masks, the recommendation, is to ensure that you use masks when you can't do physical distancing, because I think one of the things I really want to highlight here, and what I'm becoming a little bit concerned about, is where I'm seeing the use of masks. We're seeing that people aren't really adhering to the physical distancing anymore. Even if you're wearing masks, you still need to try to do the physical distancing of at least 1 meter, and even further if you can. So it's not just masks alone. It's not just physical distancing alone. You've heard the DG say this many, many times. It's not just hand cleaning alone. Do it all.
The WHO also said it was setting up a committee to consider changing the rules on declaring an international health agency following criticism of its COVID-19 pandemic response. The World Health Organization declared a public health emergency of international concern, or PHEIC, over the new coronavirus on January 30, at which time the respiratory disease had infected fewer than 100 people outside China and claimed no lives beyond its borders. But under the current international health regulations, IHR, governing preparedness and response for health emergencies, there are no lower intermediate levels of alarm beneath a full PHEIC, either on a global or regional scale. The WHO has faced accusations, notably from Washington, of mishandling the pandemic and waiting too long to sound the alarm.
Earlier today, I informed WHO's member states that I plan to establish an IHR review committee to advise me on whether any changes to the IHR may be necessary to ensure this powerful tool of international law is as effective as possible. The committee will be made up of independent experts who will examine various aspects of the IHR. Although the review committee's remit is specific to the IHR, it will communicate with the independent panel for pandemic preparedness and response and with the independent oversight advisory committee for the WHO Health Emergencies Program to exchange information and share findings.
Unmute yourself.
Now, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus told a virtual conference that COVID-19 pandemic had been an acid test for countries as well as for the IHR, and he added that even before the coronavirus pandemic, emergencies such as the Ebola outbreak in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo had exposed flaws in the IHR or international health regulations. The Secretary for the Civil Service, Patrick Nip, announced that 141 specimen collection centers will operate in 18 districts under the Universal Community Testing Program in Hong Kong. During a press conference with the media, Mr. Nip said the program's objective is to identify infected people in the community, especially asymptomatic cases.
The objective of the Universal Community Testing Program is to identify those infected in the community, especially those asymptomatic cases. On the selection of specimen collection centers, basically we want to have these centers in the community in our 18 districts. And our first priority is, of course, to identify those sites belonging to the government. And also the sites should be large enough so that we could put in place appropriate infection control measures and social distancing measures. We include schools because, as you know, in schools there are school halls, playgrounds, and ample areas. So basically, it's a suitable site. And the Education Bureau is in liaison with the relevant schools, and I'm sure that they would work out suitable arrangements so that the school's operation will not be affected, because in any case there will not be face-to-face classes starting from 1st September.
Now, Hong Kong had an enviable track record of keeping the coronavirus under control until July, when infections began to soar, brought in by small groups of arrivals who were exempted from strict quarantine controls. New cases rose to more than 150 a day, and the city went back into an economically painful semi-lockdown. Citing the spike in coronavirus infections, Chief Executive Carrie Lam, a pro-Beijing appointee, postponed a local elections for a year. Daily infections have since dropped to the low double digits, but authorities believe mass voluntary testing will help eliminate hidden transmissions. In the United Kingdom, students returned to a Leicester school where they are wearing face coverings on a voluntary basis as the British government U-turns on its face coverings policy. The government backtracked on its insistence that students in England should not have to cover their nose and mouth when they return to class from next week, amid concern about a new rise in new infections. The change is being seen as another policy U-turn just weeks after ministers were forced to scrap the use of an algorithm which gave 17 and 18-year-olds lower than expected exam grades. On a visit to a school in central England, Prime Minister Boris Johnson thanked students for enduring months at home because of the outbreak, which he said had helped the country get the disease under control. Let's listen in.
I was very surprised, but also very encouraged that when I asked you what was going to make you nervous, not a single one of you, so far anyway, mentioned coronavirus. And you're quite right. You're quite right, because it shouldn't. You shouldn't be worried about it. Schools are safe, and you can have a fantastic time. Thank you all very much. Thank you.
Schools are safe, and it is fantastic to see pupils coming back, see our kids coming back to school, and want to see every single one coming back next week and in the succeeding days. So what we're doing, following what the WHO have said, is we're saying if you're in a hotspot area where there is a higher risk of transmission, then face coverings in those types of areas outside the classroom, but not in the classroom, because that's clearly nonsensical. You can't teach with face coverings, and you can't expect people to learn with face coverings.
The new guidance advises secondary school students aged 11 to 18 and staff to wear face coverings in corridors and communal areas in places with local coronavirus restrictions. Teaching unions had called for the UK government to follow Scotland, which has a separate education system and already requires pupils to cover up between lessons. But while welcoming the change, critics, including the main opposition Labour Party, said ministers had shirked their responsibility by leaving enforcement to individual schools. Labour's education spokeswoman Kate Green slammed a half-baked U-turn and said that clearer guidance should have been given earlier. London reversed policy on the wearing of face masks in shop in England after initially saying they were not necessary and was forced to backtrack on a planned reopening of primary schools in July. Education is a devolved issue for regional governments in Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Older students in Northern Ireland will be asked to wear face coverings outside classrooms from next week.
Scrooge attends his nephew's Christmas party.
At least 463 million children missed out on schooling during COVID-19 lockdowns with no access to remote learning, according to UNICEF. Now, describing the finding as a global emergency, UNICEF head Henrietta Fore said the repercussions would be felt in economies and societies for decades to come. Other data from the agency's report into education gaps during the pandemic's early months outlined the limitations of learning at home, exposing deep inequalities in educational access. At the height of nationwide and local lockdowns, nearly 1.5 billion school children were affected by school closures. Using data from 100 countries, UNICEF researchers found that school children in sub-Saharan Africa were the worst affected, with 1 in 2 unable to attend class remotely. They also found that the youngest students were most likely to miss out on remote teaching during the critical early years of learning and development. Meanwhile, France's Directorate General of Health says there has been an exponential rise in coronavirus cases, with over 7,000 new daily infections, against more than 6,000 on Thursday and 5,000 on Wednesday. Now, this assessment comes on the day outdoor mask wearing became compulsory in Paris and nearby suburbs, with non-compliance punishable with a fine of 135 euros. And Hungary says it will close its borders again from September 1 because of new coronavirus fears, becoming the first European Union country to retighten restrictions so severely. The country of almost 10 million people has been spared the brunt of the COVID-19 health crisis so far, having recorded some 5,500 cases, including 614 fatalities. From September 1, foreign citizens will not be allowed to enter the territory of Hungary, according to Prime Minister Viktor Orban's Chief of Staff, Gergely Gulyas. Gulyas told reporters most new infections in the country had originated abroad. Now, Gulyas also said Hungarian citizens returning from other countries will be allowed to enter as long as they can show 2 negative coronavirus tests or quarantine themselves for 14 days. After he lost his job because of the coronavirus pandemic, Andres Hernandez suddenly found himself trying to survive on the streets with his wife and children, joining Mexico's growing ranks of homeless. Their story is an increasingly common one in a country where poverty was rampant and many jobs were precarious even before the disease tore through the economy. Take a look.
Sí, es la primera vez. Yo nunca se me vino a la mente que me iba a pasar esa situación, pues, en mi persona, ¿verdad? Y pues no lo pensé y pues, mire, pues llegué a la calle y, sin saber nada y...
The printing workshop where Hernandez was employed closed in March, and the 50-year-old had to move out of the room he rented near Mexico City. He then traveled with his family to the capital to look for work, initially sleeping in an area of an hospital where relatives of coronavirus patients spent the night. But when they became scared of falling ill themselves, they moved to a nearby park where life became even tougher. He was later separated from his wife and children, who were taken by volunteers to a shelter in the state of Hidalgo, north of the capital. The coronavirus has killed more than 60,000 people in Mexico and ravaged its economy, the second largest in Latin America.
Sí, la verdad sí fue algo pues fuerte, difícil, duro, porque pues hoy duermes en tu cama y mañana en el pasto, en la calle. Porque pues hay personas que quieren aprovecharse, otras te malmiran porque te ven levantarte pues del pasto, ¿no? Llegué a pasar que me quisieron violar, quisieron abusar de mí, gracias a que mi pareja pues llegó, no pasó a mayores, pero pues es feo.
Calle, y estas historias son muy duras, porque la gente que habitualmente está en el espacio público aprende a convivir con la calle, a sobrevivir en la calle, pero esta gente no. Entonces,
More than 1 million formal jobs have been wiped out, according to the Mexican Institute of Social Security. The informal sector, which employs more than half of all workers, was hit even harder. Around 12 million Mexicans stopped working in April after quarantine measures were introduced, according to official figures, although the situation has since improved as the economy gradually reopens. The authorities estimated that 2.8 million people were out of work in June. Those with no safety net are in danger of falling into a new life for which they are unprepared. Now, earlier this week, the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Jerome Adams, was in Hawaii to assure the state government and the city-county of Honolulu that help is on the way as the Aloha State continues to receive new cases in triple digits. He also points out that certain ethnic groups are among the hardest hit by the coronavirus. Here's more from Ron Hamilton.
Earlier today at the Honolulu Fire Department headquarters, Mayor Kirk Caldwell announced that a second stay-at-home, work-from-home emergency order has been approved by Governor David Ige and will take effect on Thursday, August 27th. During a press briefing, Mayor Caldwell pointed out the main objectives of the latest order.
One, we're going to be doing surge testing for the next 2 weeks. 5,000 tests a day. That's 70,000 tests in 14 days. No city has actually hit the 5,000 level, but we're working hard to do so. Number two, more contact tracing. The city wants to join that effort and wants to hire somewhere between 250 and 500 contact tracers to work in coordination with the Department of Health and General Hara to do a more aggressive approach to contact tracing.
In addition, the mayor and U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams emphasized that a couple ethnic groups had been disproportionately affected by the coronavirus.
When we find those positives, they cannot be quarantined with other members of their family who continue to go to work and spread the virus, particularly in our Pacific Islander community and in our Filipino American community, where we see an increasing number of cases.
And you heard the mayor mention that the Filipino community has been particularly hard hit. I got data this morning over at Kapiolani Hospital that helped illustrate the fact that the Filipino community has been hard hit in terms of numbers of people dying and percentages of people dying from this virus. We know that people from the Pacific Islands represent about 4% of the population here in Hawaii, but about 30% of the cases. That is astounding. That is astounding to me, and that's why we want to make sure our surge testing is allowing us to get some visibility into those communities.
Honolulu City Council member Joy Manahan, himself a Filipino American, representing one of Hawaii's largest Filipino communities, shared some frustration that Honolulu should have been allowed to invest in more preventative measures back in the spring when new cases were still in the single digits.
Early on, we tried to get testing into the community health centers, but the state government's decision not to test and trace while the curve is flat is now stressing our health systems and the economy. The DOH tied the city's hands when we offered to test communities on the front line of the pandemic back in April. Testing on Oahu has not been equitable. The state's decision to coordinate testing with hospitals only is proving costly for our working families who access their health care at a federally qualified community health center. I'm glad that the federal government and the county are stepping in to provide more social justice and equity in the current testing and tracing programs. This is welcome news, not just for me in my district, but really for the county of Oahu and for the state of Hawaii. So I'm really looking forward to this new effort. I hope we can get a handle on it while the curve is flat, and I'm confident with everybody here helping, we can.
To recall, back in early May, Eagle News reported on a study by the University of Hawaii School of Medicine stating that the highest rate of COVID-19 cases in several U.S. states, including Hawaii, are among Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, more than any other racial and ethnic groups. From Honolulu, Hawaii, this is Ron Hamilton for Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Peru extended its national emergency until September 30 and prolonged the lockdown in some of the areas worst affected by the coronavirus, according to the government. The South American country has one of the worst death rates in the world from COVID-19, with 86 fatalities per 100,000 people. The departments of Cusco, Moquegua, Puno, and Tacna will remain in lockdown as they've been since Peru started lifting restrictions in the rest of the country, including the capital Lima, from July 1. Only stores selling basic necessities such as food and medicine can open. The country's borders remain closed, and the nighttime curfew in force since March 16 has been extended. Social and family gatherings remain banned throughout the country, and a Sunday curfew is still in place. A health emergency has been extended until December 7. Infections had fallen in June but climbed again in July once lockdown measures were lifted. However, they were done again this week. Peru's economy is in recession due to the lockdown measures and shrank by 30% in the second quarter. This week, Peru overtook Belgium to sit second only to the tiny European state of San Marino as the country with the highest death rate in the world. Peru has recorded more than 620,000 cases, 28,000 deaths among its 33 million population. In Latin America, it is second only to Brazil in terms of total infections and trails Brazil and Mexico in deaths. The presidential campaign is now formally underway. President Trump traveled to New Hampshire for a rally just hours after he accepted the Republican nomination for a second term, using the White House campaign as a backdrop. Let's take a look back.
Joe Biden is not a savior of America's soul. He is the destroyer of America's jobs. And if given the chance, he will be the destroyer of American greatness. Joe Biden is weak. He takes his marching orders from liberal hypocrites who drive their cities into the ground while fleeing far from the scene of the wreckage. This November, we must turn the page forever on this failed political class. The fact is, I'm here. What's the name of that building? But I'll say it differently. The fact is, we're here and they're not. We will have a safe and effective vaccine this year, and together we will crush the virus. Joe Biden's plan is not a solution to the virus, but rather it's a surrender to the virus. Mob rule. We can never allow mob rule. In the strongest possible terms, the Republican Party condemns the rioting, looting, arson, and violence we have seen in Democrat-run cities all, like Kenosha, Minneapolis, Portland, Chicago, and New York, and many others.
There's one more important. Joe Biden is good. This president has a record.
Statements followed a series of testimonials from Secretary Ben Carson, the only black member of President Trump's cabinet. Take a look.
And have given
many on the other side love to incite division by claiming that President Trump is a racist. They could not be more wrong. Years ago, Jesse Jackson gave Donald Trump an award for the economic opportunities he created for black people. In Palm Beach, Florida, Donald Trump led the crusade to allow blacks and Jews into private clubs and resorts. One of the first things he did as president.
There's one more important area where our president is right. He knows that political correctness and cancel culture are dangerous and just plain wrong. In much of the Democratic Party, it's now fashionable to say that America is racist. That is a lie. America is not a racist country. Joe Biden is good for Iran and ISIS, great for communist China, and he's a godsend to everyone who wants America to apologize, abstain, and abandon our values. Donald Trump takes a different approach. He's tough on China, and he took on ISIS and won. Before communist China gave us the coronavirus, we were breaking economic records left and right. The pandemic has set us back, but not for long.
The White House advisor and daughter, Ivanka Trump, introduced her father, U.S. President Donald Trump, as someone who came to Washington for one reason, to make America great again, and she offered also a side of his father the public rarely sees. Take a look.
My father has strong convictions. He knows what he believes, and he says what he thinks. Whether you agree with him or not, you always know where he stands. I recognize that my dad's communication style is not to everyone's taste, and I know that his tweets can feel a bit unfiltered. But the results speak for themselves. Dad, people attack you for being unconventional, but I love you for being real, and I respect you for being effective. I've been with my father, and I've seen the pain in his eyes when he receives updates on the lives that have been stolen by this plague. I have witnessed him make some of the most difficult decisions of his life. I sat with him in the Oval Office as he stopped travel to Europe. I watched him take the strongest, most inclusive economy in a lifetime, the lowest unemployment in a half century, and the highest wage increase for working families in decades, and close it down to save American lives.
Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden pushed back on President Trump and his supporters and their attack on Democrats, writing on Twitter, "Remember, every example of violence Donald Trump decries has happened on his watch under his leadership during his presidency." He also attacked Trump for staging his White House speech before an audience that did not practice social distancing and was largely free of masks to protect others from the coronavirus. Mr. President, Americans are canceling weddings and holding funerals without family. They're sacrificing so more Americans don't have to die, but instead of leading by example, you hosted a super spreader event on the South Lawn. When will you take the presidency seriously? He tweeted. Now, Biden announced Thursday he'd soon be hitting the trail with a focus on swing states where the election will ultimately be decided, including Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Wisconsin.
Not to everyone's taste.
Tens of thousands of protesters gathered at the National Mall to commemorate the iconic 1963 march in Washington, marking the anniversary of Reverend Martin Luther King. Today's called for an end to killings of black Americans at the hands of police. Take a look.
And now we must march to the ballot box and the mailboxes to defend the freedoms that earlier generations worked so hard to win.
Every black person in the United States is going to stand up. We're tired. I'm tired of looking at cameras and seeing these young black and brown people suffer.
It's never been more clear than change right now. It's happening right now because we demand it.
It's time we have a conversation with America. We need to have a conversation about your racism, about your bigotry, about your hate, about how you would
After mass protests sparked by George Floyd's death, outrage has revived over the last week since African-American Jacob Blake was shot multiple times in the back during a confrontation with police in the Midwestern city of Kenosha. Blake survived and is hospitalized but may never walk again, according to the 29-year-old's lawyer. Many at the protests expressed fury at news that Blake is shackled to his hospital bed, even though he is paralyzed. Authorities identified the officer who opened fire as Rustin Shesky, saying police were attempting to arrest Blake and had tried to subdue him with a stun gun. They added that a knife had been found in his car. In the violent and chaotic protests that followed in Kenosha, 2 people were shot dead by a man with an assault rifle. Authorities arrested a 17-year-old in the killings and filed intentional homicide charges against him. Major sports teams and leagues have called off games and matches to protest against racism and police abuse as the latest shooting rekindled the anti-racism demonstrations that have convulsed the country. Now, police have removed the handcuffs shackling Jacob Blake, who is paralyzed after U.S. police shot him repeatedly in the back to his hospital bed and stopped monitoring him, according to Blake's lawyer. African-American Blake, 29, was shot 7 times in the back point blank over the weekend by a white police officer in Kenosha, Wisconsin, and has no movement from the waist down. Word that Blake was tied to his hospital bed in Wisconsin, his father said one ankle was shackled, had caused a further uproar amid a groundswell of national anger over yet another shooting of a black man by police. Blake's father, Jacob Blake Sr., earlier expressed outrage after seeing his son restrained during a visit to the hospital on Wednesday. "Why do they have that cold steel on my son's ankle?" Blake Sr. said in an interview on CNN. "He can't get up. He couldn't get up if he wanted to. This is an insult to injury," said the younger Blake's uncle, Justin Blake. "He is paralyzed and can't walk, and they have him cuffed to the bed. Why?" Blake Sr. said his son told him he can feel pain in his legs, but is not sure if the pain is actually coming from his legs. Earlier, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers said he was baffled as to why Blake was tied to his bed. In other news, Chadwick Boseman, star of the groundbreaking superhero movie Black Panther, has died after a private 4-year battle with colon cancer, according to his publicist on Friday. Boseman, 43, never publicly discussed his condition and continued to work on major Hollywood films during and between countless operations and chemotherapy, according to his family in a statement. Boseman played his first black superhero to get his own standalone film in the record-breaking Marvel franchise with 2018's Black Panther. The movie, set in the fictional African kingdom of Wakanda, was adored by critics and audiences, becoming the first comic book film to be nominated for Best Picture at the Oscars and grossing over $1 billion worldwide. The news of Boseman's death sent shockwaves through Hollywood and around the world. Chris Evans, who played Captain America in the Marvel series, tweeted, "Chadwick was special, a true original. He was a deeply committed and constantly curious artist. He had so much amazing work still left to create. I'm endlessly grateful for our friendship." Another of Boseman's Marvel co-stars, Chris Pratt, said, "My prayers go out to Chadwick's family and loved ones. The world will miss his tremendous talent. The true power of Chadwick Boseman was bigger than anything we saw on screen," wrote Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden. From the Black Panther to Jackie Robinson, he inspired generations and showed them they can be anything they want, even superheroes. Biden's running mate, Kamala Harris, said she was heartbroken and referenced Howard University in Washington, nicknamed Bison, where they both studied. She said, "My friend and fellow Bison, Chadwick Boseman, was brilliant, kind, learned, and humble," she tweeted, "and he left too early, but his life made a difference. Sending my sincere condolences to his family." Boseman's final post to Twitter on August 12 was to congratulate Harris the day after she was announced as the Democratic candidate for vice president in the 2020 election. And the race to succeed Prime Minister Shinzo Abe kicked off formally informally on Saturday, with several contenders announcing their plans to stand a day after Japan's longest-serving leader announced his resignation. Take a look. Prime Minister Abe said he was suffering a recurrence of ulcerative colitis, the condition that forced him to cut short his first term in office, but that he would stay on until his successor is decided. Exactly how the process will unfold was still unclear, with local media reporting on Saturday that several options were being considered. Abe's ruling Liberal Democratic Party could opt for a more traditional leadership election, involving lawmakers but also members of the party nationwide. But the urgency of the situation, as well as the constraints imposed by the coronavirus outbreak, could see the party instead opt to poll only its lawmakers and regional representatives, a faster process. A decision on how the election will be held and when is expected early next week, along with more clarity on who will stand for the post. A few would-be candidates have already thrown their hats into the ring, including Party Policy Chief Fumio Kishida, a mild-mannered former foreign minister considered Abe's personal choice for successor, and ex-defense minister Shigeru Ishiba, who is seen as more popular with voters but commands less party support than some other candidates. Finance Minister Taro Aso, himself a former prime minister and long considered a likely successor to Abe, has announced he will stand. Other possible candidates include powerful Chief Cabinet Secretary Yoshihide Suga, viewed by many as a frontliner, and current Defense Minister Taro Kono, a social media savvy former foreign minister who is seen as something of a long shot. As Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced his resignation, an expert says his departure would push domestic politics into a big question mark in search of his successor. But the series of short-serving prime ministers before Abe took power is unlikely to happen again. Take a look.
Before Prime Minister Abe came into the picture, there was actually a revolving door, a series of prime ministers that served for a year or slightly more than a year or so. So there were quite a few of them. His departure would actually push Japan or push domestic politics in Japan to a big question mark, because for a long while the big discussion was whether who could be a potential successor to Abe. And right now, it's still not very clear. The one that is being frequently mentioned these days is actually the Tokyo governor, Yoriko Koike, who is actually one of Abe's protege. But of course, there are other contenders. So Koike has two advantages. Being, first of all, a lady, and Japan has never had a lady prime minister before. And secondly, being seen to be very responsive and very able to handle the COVID virus.
Meanwhile, Tokyo residents reacted after Prime Minister Shinzo Abe announced his resignation, ending his record-breaking tenure. Let's listen in.
いや大腸性肝炎っていうのはしょうがないんでしょうけど、なんか前もなんかこう大体この病気ってなんか都合よくかかるイメージがあるんで、本当かな？本当？
Eagle News will be right back.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
It's time to take one step further and face the impossible. Time to search the unknown and fight for the truth. Time to overcome boundaries and connect the world. It's time for DW News.
Mula noon hanggang ngayon, gabay natin ang MTRCB ratings sa matalino at responsableng panonood. Sa tamang pagsunod sa MTRCB ratings, ginagawa nating ligtas at makabuluhan ang panonood ng bawat miyembro ng pamilyang Pilipino. Lumipas man ang panahon, hanggang may pamilyang Pilipino, andyan ang MTRCB.
Welcome back. Canada's economy shrank at a record pace in the second quarter, but by the end of the period showed signs of a rapid recovery from the pandemic trauma that forced businesses to close and put millions out of work. Take a look. The economy contracted at an annualized pace of 38.7% in the 3 months ending June 30, according to Government Statistical Agency. In a statement, declines were recorded across the board amid a nationwide lockdown, including in consumer spending, business investment, trade and tourism, in line with analyst forecasts following an 8.2% contraction of Canada's gross domestic product in the first quarter. After steep declines at the height of the COVID-19 outbreak in April and May, however, real GDP surged 6.5% in June. And preliminary data for July forecasting, a 3% bump in real GDP, suggests the worst is over. It was a quarter to forget for Canada's economy, commented CIBC analyst Royce Mendez in a research note. The drop in GDP, he said, was of a magnitude never before and was likely the worst performance since the Great Depression, unquote. But things were looking up by the end of the second quarter with solid momentum continuing into July, he said. Now, Mr. Mendez noted also that Canadians' disposable incomes actually grew in the period as emergency government support more than offset a drag from a jump in unemployment. To other news now, an American warship sailed near the disputed Paracel Islands in the South China Sea. The U.S. Navy said, challenging Beijing's claims on the resource-rich waterway and prompting a warning from the Chinese military. Take a look. The Thursday operation came a day after China fired ballistic missiles into the sea as part of ongoing live-fire exercises, inflaming already high tensions between Washington and Beijing. The U.S. regularly conduct freedom of navigation operations in the area to challenge Chinese territorial claims. The U.S. Navy's Pacific Fleet said in a statement that the USS Muslim, a guided missile destroyer, sailed Thursday in the vicinity of the Paracel Islands to ensure critical shipping lanes in the area remain free and open. The Chinese military on Friday accused the U.S. ship of entering China's territorial waters near the islands without authorization. Chinese forces tracked the warship and then warned it to leave, according to military spokesman Li Wamin. In recent years, China has aggressively pursued its territorial claims in the South China Sea, building small shoals and reefs into military bases with airstrips and port facilities. Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia, and Taiwan have also competing claims in the South China Sea, through which international trade worth trillions of dollars passes a year. Tensions have risen this week in the area near the Paracel Islands called Xisha by Beijing, where the Chinese military has been conducting exercises. Beijing on Tuesday accused Washington of flying a U-2 spy plane into a no-fly zone to disrupt the drills, which included the ballistic missile launches. The Pentagon then accused China of destabilizing the region and using the military for unlawful maritime claims in a statement criticizing the exercises and the use of ballistic missiles in the drills. The Chinese military on Friday said the U.S. has repeatedly provoked trouble in the South China Sea, urging it to immediately stop such provocative actions. The EU warned Turkey it could face fresh sanctions, including tough economic measures, unless progress is made in reducing soaring tensions with Greece and Cyprus in the eastern Mediterranean. EU diplomatic chief Josep Borrell said the bloc wanted to give a serious chance to dialogue, but was steadfast in its support for member states Greece and Cyprus in the crisis, which has raised fears of a military standoff. Take a look.
Turkey has to abstain from unilateral actions. This is a basic element to allow the dialogue to advance. But we want to find path towards a healthier relationship in the mutual interest both the European Union and Turkey. For this reason, we must walk a fine line between preserving a true space for dialogue and at the same time showing collective strength in the defense of our common interests. We want to give a serious chance to dialogue.
A dispute over maritime borders and gas drilling rights has reignited the long-running rivalry between Athens and Ankara, with the two neighbors staging rival naval drills. Turkey and Greece have overlapping claims to areas of gas-rich waters in the eastern Mediterranean. Greece's position is that each of its islands, and there are thousands of them, is entitled to its own continental shelf with exclusive drilling rights. The EU has stood firmly behind Greece and last July sanctioned Turkey for carrying out seismic surveys of the North Cypriot coast. It has repeatedly warned Turkey against carrying out further exploration. But Turkey said that is an unfair interpretation of international law that unjustly encroaches on its own exclusive economic zone. In other news now, at least 14 people were killed after Hurricane Laura slammed into the southern U.S. states of Louisiana and Texas, according to authorities and local media. Louisiana's Governor John Bel Edwards confirmed at least 10 people had died in his state, half from using carbon monoxide producing portable generators indoors in the aftermath of the storm making landfall Thursday. 4 of the remaining deaths were caused by trees falling on people's homes, according to Edwards, while a man drowned after his boat sank in the storm. There were 464,813 customers without power in Louisiana on Friday, according to the site poweroutage.us. Texas ended up being spared the brunt of the hurricane, which has since weakened significantly. 3 of the state's 4 deaths were also reportedly due to carbon monoxide poisoning from generators. Earlier on Friday, Haiti's Civil Protection Service said 31 people had died due to Hurricane Laura, which blasted the island nation as a tropical storm last weekend before turning into a powerful Category 4 hurricane. Apple said Friday it has followed through on its decision to block the maker of Fortnite from developer tools needed to update games on its mobile devices. The move to suspend Epic Games from the iOS developers program came just days after a U.S. court rejected its bid to have Fortnite reinstated on the App Store, saying its eviction by Apple was a self-inflicted wound. The ruling against Epic Games comes amid a battle over whether Apple's tight control over the App Store and its 30% cut of revenue counts as monopolistic behavior. Apple pulled Fortnite from its online mobile apps marketplace on August 13 after Epic released an update that dodges revenue sharing with the iPhone maker. Apple does not allow users of its popular devices to download apps from anywhere but its App Store. Apple told Epic it would cut off access to tools needed to tailor software for devices powered by the iPhone maker's operating system. A judge's ruling this week prevented Apple from also cutting Epic off from access to developers' tools for its Unreal Engine that powers graphics on computers. The court recommended that Epic comply with the App Store guidelines while their case moves forward, according to Apple. Apple also said Epic has refused. Instead, they repeatedly submit Fortnite updates designed to violate the guidelines of the App Store. Apple contended Epic was putting Fortnite players in the middle of a budding battle involving the companies. Apple is asking that Epic revert Fortnite to exclusively use Apple payments, Epic said. As a matter of principle, we won't participate in this scheme. Apple is no longer allowing Epic to submit apps or updates via a developer account. NBA playoff games are set to resume on Saturday, but players are determined to keep the focus on the fight for social justice and racial equality with the help from club owners and the league. NBA Commissioner Adam Silver and National Basketball Players Association Executive Director Michelle Roberts said in a joint statement on Friday that all parties agreed to resume NBA playoff games on Saturday. The NBA-NBPA statement said we look forward to the resumption of the playoffs and continuing to work together in Orlando and in all NBA team markets to push for meaningful and sustainable change. Players and the league agreed to form a social justice coalition to address a broad range of issues, including access to voting, promoting civic engagement, and police and criminal justice reform. The announcement came on a third day of postponed NBA playoff games after the Milwaukee Bucks, shocked by the police shooting of Jacob Blake in Kenosha, Wisconsin, refused to take the court Wednesday for a scheduled Eastern Conference first-round matchup against Orlando in the NBA's COVID-19 quarantine bubble at Disney World in Orlando, Florida. Milwaukee is scheduled to take the court against Orlando on Saturday with a chance to advance to the second round. Oklahoma City take on Houston, and the Los Angeles Lakers face Portland in another potential series-clinching game. Lakers superstar LeBron James was reportedly among a small group of players who consulted with former President Barack Obama to find a productive way forward after games were halted. Amid the pandemic, the Church of Christ members gave relief packages to senior citizens in Willow Center in Winnipeg. Here's Kathleen May Pangan for the update.
The members of the Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, are delighted in celebrating their 106th anniversary today, July 27, 2020, by giving care packages to those who are in need here in Willow Center, number 61 Tyndall Avenue, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
The Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, through the leadership of their Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, through the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, continues to show their love and care for the people who are affected because of the COVID-19 virus.
My name is Shannon Sakota, and I'm the property manager of Willow Center Incorporated. I think it's an excellent program, and we're very happy that you chose to come here and help our seniors, and we appreciate everything that you're doing for the seniors in our community, and we'd like to thank the Church of Christ.
Despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the members are extremely inspired and motivated by their Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, to help and show their love and care to their fellow men through the Aid to Humanity Outreach Program.
Thank you so much po, Ka Eduardo po, for your love to all of us. As we celebrate the 106th anniversary of the church, we feel your love for all of us. And we are so thankful po that you love us so much. From Manitoba, we would also like to extend our love po and our hearts and our loyalty. And on this day, we pray that we were able to bring glory to our Lord God and always po extend your love to the community here in Manitoba. The residents, those that have helped us, Kevin Lamoureux and Cindy Lamoureux and Malaya Marcelino po, they extend their thanks to the church for all that we have done to the community. And this is because you have taught us po. And under your leadership, We are so thankful that we are able to reach out to the community and show how much the Church of Christ truly loves our fellow men. We love you so much, po.
Well, you know, a few things come to mind, and first and foremost, today actually marks a really important day because it marks 106 years of the Church of Christ. And here the Church of Christ is doing community events throughout the entire world. And today we happen to be in Winnipeg, and what makes this event extra special and close to heart for me is it's in the constituency I have the honor of representing inside of the Manitoba legislature. And the event today is one of very many Aid for Humanity events that the Church of Christ and Brother Eduardo put on throughout the year, many times throughout the year. And it's just an opportunity to give back to the community. I'm happy 106 years, Church of Christ, and thank you for your continuous work.
We're here at the Forks in the center of Canada in Winnipeg, Manitoba. My name is Malaya Marcelino, and I'm the member of the legislature here in the province of Manitoba. I'd like to give my sincere congratulations to the brethren of INC worldwide under the faithful leadership of your executive minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo. Congratulations on your 106th anniversary. May you grow and continue to prosper and to continue the good works that you're doing to aid humanity here in Canada and around the world. Congratulations on your 106th.
The Iglesia ni Cristo indeed is a positive force in society to members and non-members alike. Reporting for Eagle News from Manitoba, Canada, I am Kathleen May Pangan. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Kathleen. Now, in time of physical and emotional distance, we give importance to the unsung service delivered by our frontliners, our news correspondents positioned all over the world. Without them, we would not have the eagle-eye focus on the facts of this pandemic and its continuing repercussions on our lives. To our international correspondents, thank you for staying in touch with our viewers. Stay safe, protect yourselves and others. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.